Now we'd like to have a panel come up to talk about something that's been on people's minds, obviously. We're calling this panel Pittsburgh for All, and it's going to be moderated by Doug Heuck, the editor and publisher of Pittsburgh Quarterly.
As we're assembling, I don't know if I guess I'm on. As we're all making our way to the chairs, I would like to thank everyone for being here, but also a big thanks to Meg for putting this on. This is terrific. Thank you. Hi. Nice to meet you. So, 100 years ago, as was mentioned very recently, Pittsburgh was literally a cauldron of diversity. If you have the occasion to read the famous Pittsburgh survey of 1906, 1907, there are whole passages that are kind of astounding, vivid arrays of diversity of all sorts that kind of stunned the country because people were coming from all over the world to Pittsburgh. Well, that has changed over time, especially over the last 45 years. Between 1970 and 2010, at a time when the Hispanic population immigration grew fivefold in the U.S. to 50 million, and Asians in the U.S. grew twice as fast, increasing tenfold to 15 million. Pittsburgh, essentially not being a coastal city, but also that was the time that we were essentially out of business in terms of jobs. So the net result is that now we are the whitest big city in America. As Meg mentioned in her opening comments, with an expected worker shortage, which many are calling a looming crisis, we're facing some 100,000 plus jobs that are not going to be filled unless we do some things about it. And with white population expected over the next 40 years in the U.S. to decline by 10% in real numbers, it causes, you can see connect the dots, and it's a problem for us. So we need to attract people of all kinds, be welcoming, inclusive, et cetera, to people of all kinds and all races. And a question is, how do we do that? Melanie Harrington, CEO of Vibrant Pittsburgh, and I and others at Pitt released a big survey on diversity in the fall, which I would, if you want to see it, it's fairly enlightening and eye-opening. It's at pittsburghtoday.org. We have a great panel today. We have a half hour, and there are 6 of them. So I was going to have everyone introduce themselves, but in order to save time, I'm just going to kind of jump right in and introduce the people and give them a question, and then everybody's equipped with a buzzer, and since we're short on time, it's going to be like a quiz show. There will be a few questions, and whoever buzzes first gets to answer. I'm going to start with John Wallace, professor at the University of Pittsburgh, School of Social Work, Katz School of Business, and I know of you, Professor Wallace, mainly with your being instrumental in the Homewood Children's Village project. And I'm just curious, what have you learned about key elements in helping children in disadvantaged areas become more successful? And feel free to venture out beyond that.
Sure. So the fundamental challenge that we face here in Pittsburgh around children are the realities of poverty. I don't know, I'm a graphic guy. I don't know, there's 3 things I'd like you to see. You see a red line here? Can you guys see that? You see the blue lines here? And you see this black line here? You see that? Good. That's all you need to know. So this red line, these on the bottom, these represents the largest metro areas in the country. This red line is the proportion of African American children in our city who are poor. That's 62%. We are absolutely last of all of the major metro areas. So you have Detroit, Chicago, you name it, they're there. And then this black line. So this is 62% here. It's 15% of white children in our city are poor compared to 62% of African American children. It's that number and that gap that we wrestle with, and the fact that we are hyper-segregated and economically segregated creates the reality of our academic challenges. And so unless we deal with the issues of education, entrepreneurship, and employment, and equity is the frame around those things, we'll continue to have challenges. But the beauty is we are the city of champions. And we are campus of the University of Pittsburgh. Carnegie Mellon is down the street. If we can make robots go into buildings and send people to the moon and cure polio and maybe even cancer, we certainly can educate poor children.
Thank you. Melanie, demographics are kind of notoriously difficult to change. You are, as you know, the leader of Vibrant Pittsburgh, it's kind of most visibly your responsibility to wave your wand and change everything. Now, I know that many others probably from your view bear the responsibility, and I'm just wondering if you could say, who is which of us, who are responsible for making this change, and how do we begin to go about it?
So, first of all, Vibrant Pittsburgh, we were established to grow the diversity of the Pittsburgh region. It's almost like saying you're established to boil the ocean. But I will say, can I have everybody raise your hand in the audience here? Everybody, the panel included, everybody. And now everybody, so do you have your hand? These are the people who are responsible for making Pittsburgh a more diverse region, okay? It is all of us. There's something that Mr. Graham said earlier in his speech about those regions that are successful with entrepreneurialism, startups and everything, are those places that are uncomfortable with strange. I'm going to use the term, those are places that are comfortable with difference. And because that is what is going to contribute to the driver. That is why we were created as an economic development agency for the region, to attract the diversity that's going to contribute to that economic gain for the region. There was recently an article in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette talking about the fact that we have still not yet overcome our population decline challenge. They attribute that not just to the mortality rate issues in our region, how old we're getting, but it's also the fact that we are not retaining people like we need to as a region. In the diversity study that we did with Pittsburgh Today, one of the key findings of that study was that young people in particular said, diverse people overwhelmingly said that the one reason I will leave the region is if I can't advance in the region. So you may be thinking about Pittsburgh region as a starting place, but are you thinking about it as a place where you can advance? And I think those are two things that we want to think about. How we not be complacent, as former Mayor Murphy said, and all be engaged in broadening our networks and circles, but also how we create opportunities for people to advance. That's my thinking.
Thank you. Two over from Melanie. Claire Hosteny is the partner with East End Development Partners. More well-known, the project for their Ace Hotel, the great new place that everybody wants to go to and is going to. So Claire, I'm curious what your experience has been in terms of, I know you've been, inclusiveness is part of your brand. I mean, what have you learned and how has it gone?
Well, I think it's really exciting because the Ace Hotel activated one of these amazing historic buildings that could have been taken down by a wrecking ball. I also think it's really exciting because we brought a world-renowned brand. It's the highest performing hospitality brand in the world right now, and it's known for being inclusive. And to me, that was a perfect fit for East Liberty. East Liberty is really this estuary condition where high tech and low income and prosperity and past and future are all commingling to create this really exciting dynamic that's occurring both on the sidewalk and inside our property. And so I think that the Ace Hotel coming to Pittsburgh, which in every single meeting we had with outsiders was, why are they coming to Pittsburgh? I was like, why aren't they? We're awesome, they're awesome, we fit together. And so it was a really big challenge for us to finance a deal like this. Hospitality is a difficult sector to begin with. Boutique hotel is an even more complicated sector. when you take people like my partner Nate Cunningham and I that don't have a lot of money and we want to do a $25 million deal, you get a lot of complications. But I think, you know, that inherent Pittsburgh willingness to keep going when everyone else stopped, Detroit, I think that really is representative in this property. And one thing that we feel is really exciting about this brand is Ace Hotel is known for being inclusive. I believe on our property in Pittsburgh, you know, we have maybe 70% of our employees are LGBTQH. And so we're really excited to have the best employees in the city and that this is a place where everyone feels like they can apply for a job. You know, we also reserve 25% of our jobs through a special financing model for low-income people, because it was really important that, you know, when you build an opportunity, and jobs are opportunities, we have over 100 people employed at the hotel, that all kinds of people could apply and get those jobs and stay in the neighborhood and work.
Thanks. Well, so 2 over. Jeremy Leventhal, you're the managing partner of Faros Properties, and you guys are involved in all sorts of things, Washington Plaza and probably, and much bigger, the Allegheny Center project. So that's a big project, and we're all happy to see that undergoing transformation after so many years of being kind of a fallow zone. What kind of vitality and diversity, and how can these projects affect the situation we face here?
So it's interesting. I mean, I think getting back to actually what Paul Graham was talking about earlier, a lot of the themes for why we were interested in investing in Pittsburgh. I'm originally from Boston. I live mostly in New York now when I'm not in Pittsburgh. And we came into this market 3 or 4 years ago. And what really attracted us to this market was that it has these amazing cultural institutions. It's a great quality of life. It has affordable housing stock. It has amazing and thriving and growing restaurants and bars, and it has a high concentration of intellectual capital. And for those reasons, we were really attracted to this market, and we started investing here. And you know, to date, over that period of time, we've invested over $350 million in the region, 1,500 apartments, over 1.5 million square feet of office space. Our largest project to date, which is Allegheny Center, which includes 800 apartments and over 1.5 million square feet of office, is a very apt project to discuss because it's in a neighborhood, the North Side, which is a very eclectic neighborhood. It is 50%, roughly 50% African American, 40% Caucasian, and 10% of the rest. It is the actual project, which is 30 acres corner to corner, which was developed by Alcoa, demolished a city at one point in the 1960s, which was very controversial. And it created this moat environment around it, which was largely walled off from the community for over 50 years. And so, and investing in the project, which was an interesting proposition and something that a lot of people were not enthusiastic about, other developers, we really saw an opportunity to change the dynamic of the project, change the dynamic of the neighborhood, and help reintroduce the project into the fabric of the neighborhood. And we started to do that not just by pouring money and capital into improving it, but also to trying to program it. So our plaza, for example, is over almost 2 football fields in size in the middle of the site. We started partnering on that. So we partnered recently with the Children's Museum to host Maker Fair there for 7,500 people over the course of a weekend in the fall. We're working on more programming later this year. We're building the largest co-working space in Pittsburgh now, 50,000 square feet of co-working space, which is going to allow entrepreneurs, startups, regular companies the ability to rent a single desk for right now under $100 a month on flexible month-to-month terms for as long as they want. So, you know, that ability to try and include the community is really important to us, and overall we think is value add to what we're trying to do here.
Great. Good luck. Yeah. Bill Generett is president and CEO of Urban Innovation 21. I know of Bill through his work spurring entrepreneurship in economically disadvantaged neighborhoods. We've written a story about it. I'm wondering, you know, how is it going, and what are the keys to succeeding in that?
Sure. So I just want to step back for a second. When Tom Murphy was talking about the Pittsburghers that left and came back, I'm one of those. I left when Pittsburgh was doing bad and came back because I saw a different Pittsburgh, and I'm proud to be here. But what I'm seeing now is I'm seeing two Pittsburghs, and I'm seeing 30% of our city, and that's the Pittsburgh Foundation, really, that really is not connected. It has the potential to not be connected, and so our organization started in 2007. We have a variety of incentives to help grow the tech economy, and that's really for entrepreneurs. We like to say that we're, either second or third in terms of the amount of incentives that we're able to provide to high growth companies, but really with the goal of getting them to locate in some of our region's disconnected communities. And I think there's been some success, but not just because of the entrepreneurship, really because when you have clusters of entrepreneurs, you see growth happen. And our goal is always to make sure that growth just doesn't benefit the entrepreneurs, but it benefits the residents that live in these communities. And so there has been some success, but we have to all scale up this work. And I do want to make a plug for Detroit. I had the opportunity to do some work in Detroit. And one of the things they realized, and one of the things that a lot of cities are realizing, is that true inclusion is the most important thing now. And if a city does not figure it out or does not scale up efforts around those are going to be the cities that are laughed at 10, 15, 20 years from now. So we really have to be hungry. I can sit here and talk about some of our successes, but the reality is, as Dr. Wallace so eloquently stated, we have an F in terms of inclusion, especially with our African American population. So I'm not going to sit up here and talk about my successes. I think there's some definite frameworks, but we got to scale this stuff, and we all have to do it. It has to be scaled by 100, and it's going to be a 10, 15, 20, 30-year process.
Thank you. Audrey Russo is the president and CEO of the Pittsburgh Technology Council. And Audrey, the Tech Council, I guess it got started in 1983 or 84 as the High Technology Council. That was really one of the first big steps taken in Pittsburgh's transition. And part of the idea, a lot of people were skeptical that Pittsburgh could become a technology-based city at that time. You guys have a lot of experience in changing what can be and kind of an iron-bound culture. What have you learned about changing culture in Pittsburgh, and how can those lessons be applied to the question of diversity and inclusion?
Well, it's interesting, in '83, and I guess I'm a Pittsburgher now. It's sort of gotten under my skin since 2001. But I can tell you that from the work that the council has done since 1983, their charter still holds true in terms of its importance. So let me tell you what all of those guys, and by the way, they were guys back then, and they were white guys. And we joke about that, but it's important to understand that these were white guys who said they weren't going to let the region go to hell in a handbasket. And they knew that inside the universities there was a lot of amazing work going on, but they also knew the emergence of advanced manufacturing. And they said, we can't ignore that. And so they had 4 priorities, and those are still 4 priorities that are imperative today. One is to have a significant civic engagement with policy and elected officials. And you can't overlook that. No matter how many of you or how many of us don't want to be engaged, it's important for us to be at the table and to design policy and to structure that and to advocate it. And that is part of the role of someone who is running a business. It just is. And so we still are very involved in that, and that's still true. The second is talent. Even back in the 80s, they said if we don't have seasoned talent that has diversity in their experience, in their age, and across these emerging sectors, we're not going to be able to have any credibility in being a global provider, whether it's services or products or any kind of innovation. And the other piece is really telling the story. And it's that deep kind of storytelling that has to be pervasive and has to be told to people who are in the Pittsburgh region, but people who are beyond the Pittsburgh region. So, you know, fast forward on a personal observation professionally is that while we've made tremendous strides, you've heard all day about entrepreneurship. This is a great place to start your companies. And we have an amazing ecosystem of support. You've heard from many of those people here, and it's impeccable in terms of how committed they are to launch these companies and these fledgling companies. It is the next stage. It's the next stage of growth that we're really missing. And so it's really about money. And if we don't create wealth amongst all of us in terms of entrepreneurism, and that wealth begins to perpetuate the reinvestment in this community, we still will have what Doug talked about is the decreased population. And that decreased population becomes a story in and of itself. You already see in the ink now, you're seeing Pittsburgh, the best city that's shrinking. You know, we're going to feel that as we move ahead. So personally, I think on my end, just being a professional and sort of having the luxury of having an aerial view of what's happening across this region and then traveling to the east and west coast with enough frequency and to work closely with my colleagues, like you heard from Andrew Moore, and try to wrestle through what the complexities are, is all of us sitting up here, we have to be the good old boys club. And our network has to be that strong amongst us so that I know I can call Dr. Wallace up. He knows he can call me because it's really about relationships. And that's where I think the opportunity is when Melanie said, how many of us are responsible for the diversity? It's all of us. So let's create that next generation of a club.
So thank you, Audrey. I'm going to ask a question, then I'd like to open it up to questions for you all. And I have a stopwatch going, so I'm going to cut us off at the appropriate time. But I was in Austin last week, and I'm curious to ask you all what we can do, some action steps to kind of, you know, attract and retain people, to make it more welcoming, more inclusive. But I'm going to prime the pump by saying, if we just had at least, you know, a better music club,
Where's Kat? I say that all the time.
my things there, I'm back. But I want to ask you guys, what are some things that people who are in the audience or in the region can do themselves? They could be complex with their organizations. They could be simple to start, you know, making this a place that embraces and literally and lets people know we want them no matter what you look like, no matter et cetera, et cetera. Any thoughts? Bill?
Yeah, one, I think we have to be uniquely Pittsburgh. I've been to Silicon Valley, and when you look at the income inequality there, I don't want that. I don't want that. We need to, yeah. Let's be us, and let's make sure that we do us better. That's one. Two, let's demystify inclusion. You know, we've made this thing too complicated. Right?
You said true inclusion before. I want to say, and I was about to ask you, demystify it for us.
Well, it's whatever you're doing, you know, who's there? Who's there? Who's there? Mm-hmm. If you have a company, how's that company look? If you have a real estate development project, how does it look? Who's able to take advantage of the incentives? And it's really setting high goals and making it happen. And we have many examples of that, and we have many people doing really good work. A lot of it's not highlighted. I mean, I think one of the things I'm excited about with this new accelerator is that when you go there now and you look at the diversity, it's diverse. You have a couple of African-American entrepreneurs. You have women entrepreneurs. That's what diversity is. That's what inclusion is, you know. Sometimes we make it more difficult, but it's giving people the opportunity, but, you know, making sure that on all levels, and that's what inclusive innovation is. It's making sure that we look at it from a perspective where we're looking at the most disconnected populations and saying, how does this impact them? And just making it happen. You know, no excuses, just making it happen.
So any other thoughts from you all on steps people can do?
Yeah, I think this is a really concrete step that anyone can take. You know, there's empirical evidence that I learned about from the Allegheny Conference, so I'm grateful to them for this education. When you post jobs online and you put all the qualifications that you want for that particular position, the chance that a woman will apply for that job plummets. So when you put in your job, posting online, these are a few of the characteristics we would like to see, rather than your absolute best maximum candidate of your dreams. The likelihood that a woman will be qualified and apply for that job really skyrockets. So I think that's a really tangible step to increase inclusiveness, both in your candidates and your workforce.
Any other takers?
Well,
Go ahead.
I think if you're running a company and you're based, in Pittsburgh, even though you might have people all over, be a part of the community. Be a part of it. Don't think that people are just going to apply for jobs just because the job looks okay. It is a democratized world. Everyone knows what's going on.
What do you mean be a part of the community?
Meaning, really get engaged. Figure out what that one piece is that you have enough time for, that matters, that you think is going to be able to convey the values that you have in your company, or what you're trying to convey for your company as being part of the community here.
Melanie?
I was going to say, remove the cover from the opportunity. Make it much more visible. If people cannot access the opportunity, then they'll make a decision to be someplace else. All these people we're inviting here will put up with not being able to find, access, get to what and who they need for a second before they'll begin to be called by another region for opportunity. We are ultimately regions in competition with each other for the best and the brightest talent. And I think that opportunity here is sometimes inaccessible and invisible to people. So we need to take the cover off of it.
I would say commit to wanting and doing for everyone's children what we want for our own. And so we have the Pittsburgh Promise here in the city of Pittsburgh, which is mind-boggling. And as a Head Start graduate and someone who recognizes the significance of education, the fact that only 13% of the kids at Westinghouse High School were eligible for the Pittsburgh Promise last year, and that's a game changer. And so we really have to leverage that investment that's being made in this region, in this city, for the well-being of our kids. So that means mentoring, donating, just being willing to hire a young person in the summertime, but whatever, something around young people and allowing them to take advantage of the huge opportunity that is in the Pittsburgh Promise. And education, as we all know in this room, is really the foundation for our future success as a city and as a region.
And we all, interestingly enough, could think about ways, I'm thinking about a way, and so I assume the others, you all are at least as good at thinkers as I am, as how we could personally get involved in such a broad and manifold number of opportunities. I want to open it up for questions. We have about 3.5 minutes. Yes.
Great. So I'm that jogger from Silicon Valley. I've got a reflection and a question. The reflection is in studying Silicon Valley a little bit, I believe a lot of the action there started to happen when HP was founded and created unbelievable amounts of wealth that then percolated throughout the region and continues to do that with like the PayPal mafia, Google, ex-Google employees, and all these people. The money trickles, but it trickles down, but it finds those who have had the most privilege to achieve the highest level of technical expertise and sophistication, and then bestows them the next generation of wealth. Right. And then it propagates, but with a very, with that problematic distribution of wealth issue there. Then in 2008, we had the great crash, and that eviscerated a lot of the wealth from minority communities around the country. And so the wealth, who owns the wealth, I think is a big issue here. And I would, but I want to take it that one little step further in that it becomes problematic when you're trying to get a startup going, what the cost of failure is. And if you don't have wealth within your community, then the cost is much higher. And so just making a job available for a minority person or someone with less privilege or just didn't have access to that doesn't necessarily make it enticing for them or available to them. I would love it if you could speak to how do we backfill that failure crisis or failure gap there. Yeah, it looks like you're on it. Go for it.
Yeah, just real quick. I think we have to change the narrative a little bit. I'm very fortunate, but I'm fortunate in part because of privilege, not because I'm so great. And we have a lot of Silicon Valley entrepreneurs, tech entrepreneurs that are successful, not because they're so great, but in part because of privilege. And that's okay, but let's realize that. But also let's realize that when we're looking at others and not looking at them through a deficit model lens. And I'll give you an example. We have a company here, African-American owned company here that, because of disconnected networks, I ended up getting into Y Combinator and doing very well, raising a lot of money out in the valley, but struggling here. And part of that was just because of disconnected networks, not sort of knowing the roadmap, but also in part because oftentimes how people view African Americans, they be minorities, it's sort of through this lens that just isn't correct.
Is there another question? Yes.
Yes, hi. Doug, you just mentioned music. So my name is Emily Plazik, and I'm the founder of a company here called Mike Pittsburgh, which is like Mike, M-I-C, Mike.
Right.
And Audrey, I don't know
I
if you're...
just met you. Yeah, right.
Wait, what?
Didn't we just meet?
We're going to, because one of my partners, Jody Ball, is on your council in the creative sector. So, yes. So basically, we've been working on helping local musicians, like startup incubators, help other companies so that local musicians can turn their hobbies into careers. And I've been sitting here thinking, my question I want to ask you guys is, I love events like this because it's very obvious you get to meet people. Right now, I'm planning a bunch of PR for a specific crowdfund that we're launching in 10 days because we're using Indiegogo because we don't have angel investors. And it is so time intensive when you don't have a bunch of networking events like this to go to, especially because music is this kind of oddball out, never really discussed sector. What other places do you recommend going to meet more people like you more often?
The bar.
Yeah. I was just going to say that.
At the Ace Hotel, just saying.
That's a good.
Do you guys have an answer to that? The Ace Hotel?
Yeah.
I mean, actually, I do hear that that's a great place to meet people. What's the name of the bar there?
So Whitfield is the restaurant at the Ace Hotel, and we also have a bar in the lobby where I think a solid 1/3 of the people just met on Tinder. I think about a third of the people are going to some sort of event, maybe at the Kelly Strayhorn down the street, or experiencing, any of the events that we curate there, or checking out our Teenie Harris exhibition. And then I think a third of them are looking for a tech deal to invest in. So I really suggest that as a place. Places like the Duquesne Club and the PAA had their heyday 100 years ago because people wanted to go someplace to meet like-minded people to accomplish civic and business goals. I think the day of those sort of exclusive clubs is probably past its peak, and I think a more inclusive model, sort of a headquarters for the new Pittsburgh, is something that we've all been really waiting for and looking for, and we're really excited to have that in the East End, where you have the tech and social and cultural places all sort of commingling. So come on out.
With that, thanks for the question. I'm sorry we don't have time for more. I would like to, thank the panel. I would also like to say, Melanie and I and many others, but I know Melanie and I have been working intensively for about 18 months on various phases of our diversity project. And so I hope you all will, it is something for the whole region. It might be, on one hand, the right thing to do, but economically, it's a necessary thing to do. So I hope you will all personally consider what kind of, pebbles you can throw into the pond in this regard, because you never know how far they will ripple. And with that, thank you all very much.
Thank you.